everyone watching. Tonight, Tuesday night, is question and answer night. And as usual, a few questions have come in, so we'll do our best to give you some answers. Maybe we can have the first question.
Dear Ajahn, I hope you are well. I would like to ask if I could. It's said that to tackle our cravings, one has to be in samadhi. Does that mean in meditation, or to just have a still mind to see dukkha in our cravings, with much metta and respect?
Well, we certainly need to put effort into developing samadhi, states of stillness, calm. It's part of the Eightfold Path, to give us that clarity. The mind that is still, peaceful, will expose what is not still, what is not peaceful. And that's craving, we say tanha, or kilesa. So any thoughts and intentions rooted in greed, anger, delusion. But craving itself is divided into three main types. Sensual craving for the objects of senses, and usually pleasure, seeking pleasure. Craving to become, all our ideas, expectations, wants as far as becoming somebody in one way or another in this world, what we desire to be, who we desire to be, what we associate with happiness and success and all the things we want in life. And then craving not to become, so not to be what we don't like, what we don't want. So we want to be successful, we don't want to be a failure, we want to be wealthy, we don't want to be poor, we want to look nice, don't look bad, say. There's so many varieties and variations here, but it's that desire to not be, not experience, not have, not want, not like. Get rid of what we don't want. So three types of craving, and just craving, as the Buddha pointed out, is the origin of our suffering as human beings. Unskillful mental states that arise pretty much all through our day, although not necessarily all the time, but reoccurring through our day, through our life. And to see them, one needs the whole of the Eightfold Path. One needs the wisdom of right view, samadhi, and right resolve or right thought. Needs the peace that comes from practicing right speech, right action, right livelihood. One needs right effort, so to get the mind putting effort into abandoning unskillful states, which include all the different kinds of craving, and cultivating the path, which is, you might call, wholesome desire. Craving is like unskillful desire to be abandoned. The path and the path factors are wholesome desire to be developed. So all desire is not bad. The desire to practice the path, cultivate the path is good. And then, most important of all, we need mindfulness, the ability to pay attention to this body and mind in the present moment. And as we practice more mindfulness and experience more steadiness and continuity of mindfulness and clear awareness, then states of samadhi will arise, and they're made up of continuous mindfulness. So to abandon craving, well, one can actually just abandon by having a moment of mindfulness and see craving arising and choose to let it go. It can be as simple as that. That might not be the final abandoning of craving. The final abandoning of craving is the stages of enlightenment where, say, a sotapanna, stream enterer, has abandoned some craving, although not all, and then a once returner, non-returner have abandoned more craving, and then finally the arahant has abandoned all craving. But it doesn't mean to say, we're practicing on this path, we may not be a noble one yet, but it doesn't mean to say we can't practice abandoning craving, and we may not even yet have experienced much samadhi, but we can still practice abandoning craving if we see it, if we recognize it in our behavior, and sometimes we recognize it first in our speech and our actions, and then we trace back to the source in our own mind, and we notice, oh, I'm angry about something and it's come out in my speech or my actions. We trace back, recognize that anger as a form of craving, vibhava tanha, and maybe have enough awareness to say, no, I'm not going to follow this, establish mindfulness, and at least temporarily abandon the tendency to follow that craving in that moment. And we do that sometimes. You might have a craving to eat a certain kind of food, say a snack, when you're not really that hungry, it's not that urgent to eat yet. It's just desire, oh, I like the taste of that, I think I'll have a snack just to feel good. But then at that moment we recognize, oh, this is craving, and maybe it's just coming from ignorance, lack of wisdom, lack of awareness. I don't really need to follow it, so I'll choose just to let it be. And when you establish mindfulness, any moment when mindfulness arises, craving will tend to subside. As I said, it may only be temporary, it may reoccur again, as we know. It's a stubborn thing, craving. But if you're starting to practice in this way, your mindfulness and wisdom, which are the main qualities that will recognize and abandon craving, they're going to improve, so you're going to get better at it. Having said that, when we develop samadhi, we're developing states of real calm, peace, stillness. And the deepest states of samadhi, jhanas, or what we call appana samadhi, one can't really contemplate in them, and yet they still have a purifying effect on the mind. Because the mind is getting used to this inner happiness, not dependent on any external sense objects. So, say the craving for sense pleasures dies away during that period. And we're getting used to that, to being happy, independent of the desire for sense objects. So at least we know it's possible. It's possible to be happy and peaceful without a lot of other stuff, people, things, experiences. That's very important for the mind, and it's also conditioning the mind to just get used to being peaceful and not craving. However, to really uproot craving, we have to contemplate and use wisdom and observation and see craving, as a source of suffering. So for that, to do that, one may still be in a state of samadhi, but it's not the deepest state of jhana. One might withdraw to a state we call upajjhara samadhi, access concentration, or even, as they call it, khanika samadhi, momentary concentration, where the mind is calm and still, but it can recognize craving arising and it's not going to follow it. It knows this is the cause of suffering, this is to be abandoned, and there's enough calm and clarity and brightness of mind to do that in that moment. So little by little we're training the mind to do this, and the more effort we put into the practice, the longer we do it, the better we'll get at it. So then there's a chance that some of our craving will, in this very life, be completely abandoned from our mind, or if you go all the way, maybe attain nibbana and all craving is done away with. One of the useful things about samadhi is it's a state where the mind is peaceful, happy, free from the hindrances, the various ways craving manifests in the mind. The craving goes quiet when we're in samadhi. So the mind is bright, radiant. That in itself can still become a cause of craving. Unfortunately, craving is subtle and stubborn and tricky, so even the bliss of samadhi can become the basis for craving. But nevertheless, if we are practicing, we just take that in our stride. We have to work with that, contemplate that. But the useful thing of samadhi is one is aware of the mind at its best, at its happiest, as it's peaceful. Even though craving may still be there in our consciousness as a conditioning factor, but it's temporarily gone quiet. So we're getting used to that and experiencing the bright mind. And then when craving does re-emerge, it's very clear, very obvious. And that helps us in the abandoning, letting go of craving, because we know, oh, this is the troublemaker, here he comes again. We see it clearly when the mind is peaceful. So the Buddha said it's a bit like you clean your piece of cloth, and then once it's clean, any speck of dirt is very obvious. If your piece of cloth, your piece of clothing or whatever it is always dirty, you never clean it very well, there's a lot of dirt on it where it's hard to see a new piece of dirt arriving because there's so much stuff there already. So samadhi has that purifying effect, and it gives us the ability to recognize craving clearly for what it is. So it plays an important role in the practice, but not to get too worried or concerned about how much samadhi do I have, how much samadhi do I need. You just do the best you can and get the idea correct in your mind that samadhi is when the mind is calm, mindfulness is present, the mind is not distracted or sleepy or caught up into a lot of greed, anger or delusion, and it's in that state or coming out of that state, it's in its best position to really recognize craving for what it is and let it go. So the more you do this, the better for you it will be.
Dear Ajahn, how to improve endurance for meditation? I can sit for up to 2 hours. How can I build up to sit the whole night?
Well, like you said, it's a practice of building up. One thing with the development of the mind in meditation or developing the Eightfold Path, the emphasis the Buddha gave is always on quality. Quantity is important, but it comes second place to quality. So even if you can't sit still in one position for more than 2 hours, which is already quite an achievement, so don't underestimate that. That's a very good thing to be able to do. Better to be able to sit for 1 or 2 hours, cultivating mindfulness, states of calm, insight well, than to be able to sit all night, so you feel good, oh, I can sit all night, but actually without much mindfulness or insight. Quality is paramount. So always be coming back to look at the quality of your mind as you train yourself. But learning to endure and to train your body to be able to sit longer and train your mind to maybe put up with some discomfort, the natural pains and aches that come up in our legs and our back as we sit for long periods, is still valuable. The Buddha reminded us over and over again this quality, khanti, which is translated as patient endurance, is the supreme destroyer of mental defilement, or they say supreme incinerator, burns defilement up. So it's a very vital quality to appreciate in your practice and to consciously try to develop. And one way people do develop it is through learning to sit longer. Once you understand the basic techniques of meditation, learning to calm the mind, so you have a meditation object such as the breath, and you're learning to pay attention to that mindfully, and you're doing that, or developing insight into the 3 characteristics of impermanence, not self, unsatisfactoriness, not self. Once you're doing that, then you obviously are going to benefit the more you can extend that practice in a very focused way. Often when we're busy working, traveling, moving around, doing things, our level of samadhi, our level of mindfulness may drop, which is understandable. But if you have the time and the opportunity to learn to sit longer as a meditation practice? Well, that's an opportunity to really deepen your level of sati and samadhi and insight. But you have to rely on patient endurance to do that. So that means sometimes you have to set yourself short-term goals. So if you can sit already for 2 hours, as I said, that's quite an achievement. Well, maybe work on being able to sit for 3 hours. And try it. And sometimes you might succeed, sometimes not. But that's okay. If you don't succeed, you build on that, come back again in the future when you're ready, do it again. Or maybe just take up slightly a longer period of time. So if you can do 2 hours, we'll just try 2 hours and 30 minutes rather than 3 hours. And most meditators build up their ability to sit longer like this. Depends on your body. Some people's bodies really don't support sitting still for long periods of time because of various problems with their joints, their back, their age, so on. So that is one factor to take into account. If you're reasonably young, reasonably fit, you definitely can learn to sit all night. And then you also have to decide what are the parameters. So, some people do the pure way. I'm just going to sit in one posture and not get up and not move, which is the hardest thing of all. If you say sit all night, that might be for a period of 7 or 8 hours, say, for example. Well, to sit for 7 or 8 hours without getting up is already hard, but without even moving your legs a little bit is hard, very hard. And you'll probably find you go through many pain barriers during that period. The pain wells up and you feel you're going to die, and then it dissipates and then it comes back worse than before. So another way you can improve your sitting is maybe allow yourself to move occasionally. If you're sitting for a whole night and you don't want to get up, but at least allow yourself to uncross the legs, move them slightly just to release some of that pain. Because there's no way around it. If you sit for a long time without moving, there will be pain. But as one's mindfulness improves, one's patient endurance improves, one's insight improves, one can sit with a lot of pain, and one knows when you get up, that pain just disappears. You might sit still without getting up for 8 hours, go through quite a few painful periods, but you learn from that. But when you get up and walk away, it all just disappears just like that. It's different from, say, an illness or an injury. It's just the pain of not moving your posture. And that's something that gives you strength, because this pain is not serious. As long as you aren't seriously impacting your health, well, you can sit for a longer and longer periods. You learn to push a bit longer and see what it does to the mind. So if you think your meditation is going quite well, I can achieve a certain level of calm and mindfulness every day, I don't have any suffering over different things, well, that's a good trigger or good motivation to sit for longer periods and see what it brings up. And if you think your meditation is good and you can sit for an hour or sit for 2 or 3 or 4 or for the whole night and just see how you go, and you might find that you get better samadhi. You probably will get, over time, if you practice it regularly, it probably will help your samadhi improve, which is why my teacher Ajahn Chah used to encourage this practice. But it won't always be easy, because you have to work through sleepiness, moods, and sometimes your moods come up quite strongly, so you get some anger, get some desires coming up, different kinds of craving. Monks have been meditating through the night, trying to sit through the night, and they keep themselves going by fantasizing about different things, following their imagination just to kind of keep the mind bright, which is ultimately not what you're aiming for, but it might happen, and you're going to have to learn from that. So, if you keep it as an exercise in learning about your mind, how it reacts in different situations, how to maintain mindfulness, how to maintain the quality of your practice as you're sitting for longer, well, it can be a great opportunity to learn more about yourself As I said, Ajahn Chah used to teach us to do this, and so when I was, went to Thailand, it was one of the first things I learned. Literally, I've been in the monastery 3 days and I did my first all-night meditation. And my body is hopeless. Like I couldn't, when I first started meditating, I could only sit for 3 minutes, cross-legged on the floor like this. And I had to get up, the pain was so intense. And I just little by little built up my ability, partly the body getting used to it, partly the mindfulness improving, the insight, understanding pain is not self, so I could let go of pain. That improved. But the first time I did an all-night meditation, I could only sit for an hour or 2, and then that was it. Too much pain. So I just did walking meditation. And that's valuable as well. If you can walk mindfully, maybe you don't have to sit all night, you can walk all night, or walk for part of the night and sit for part of the night. So there's nothing is absolute here. The Buddha didn't say to reach Nibbana you have to sit all night without moving. What he said is you have to cultivate the Eightfold Noble Path and bring it to completion. So if walking meditation works for you to do that, well, that's okay, or sitting and walking, or just sitting. And if you can only sit for a few hours and then you do other things and you come back later, well, that's okay. You have to learn what is working for you within the limits of your physical well-being and body, and then your mental ability as well. But just keep pushing a little bit more over time, and you will find the ability to maintain mindfulness for longer periods of time will improve.
Dear Ajahn, why can we have a peaceful, happy meditation experience one day, but not the next?
Because life is uncertain and our mind is uncertain, and the factors that come together to make a peaceful meditation one day may not be present the next day. And this is part of the practice. You're both developing mindfulness in the present moment, say when you practice meditation, but you're also reflecting on your practice, both before, during, after. So after the practice, if it wasn't peaceful, we'll reflect back, why not? And you can learn. And it may be quite obvious. Some days, with the best intention in the world, you've heard some bad news, or you had an argument with somebody, or your health is down. Some days are going to be harder than others. But having said that, even though some days are harder than others, there are other factors which can override some of those things as well. So like our effort, you notice if you meditate regularly, there'll be those days when you're more complacent, doing it in a more perfunctory way, just meditating, just clocking in, like you go to work. In the old days when I used to work, when I was 16, go into work, you clock in, you punch your card in, do your hours, get home, so you got your money. Meditation can be like that sometimes. Okay, I'll do my half an hour, and you just fall asleep, or you let your mind wander all over the place. So attitude is very important. So skillful recollections on things that inspire you, motivate you, energize you, recognizing your state of mind, say before you meditate or at the beginning of your meditation, recognizing what's going on. How has my day been, or how is things going? Do I have a lot of anger or greed or anxiety? And having some strategies and plans what to do if you are caught into particular mind states that are obstructing your mind from settling down, bringing up mindfulness. So as I said, having some skillful reflections that you've turned to because you used them before. So say you do mindfulness of breathing as your main meditation, which is good, but then one day you're full of anger because of something that's happened with another person. Well, you might, at that point, when you come to meditate, because you've got anger, well, you develop metta meditation on the theme of kindness or compassion or forgiveness because you've got a particular problem. That can help. or if it's particularly a desire for something, like we've been talking about craving, you have desire, or try and find that sense of contentment. Teach yourself, maybe that thing I'm desiring isn't that important. How can I let it go? There's so many skillful means you can employ to deal with a bad day, bad meditation. But one thing is just to accept it will happen, just like any other skill, hobby, work, thing you do in life. Until you are skilled, there'll be ups and downs, and your effort fades. Some days you try hard, some days not. Some days you're complacent, sometimes you're really energized and motivated. Sometimes you're wise and you see what's going on. Sometimes you miss it all and you feel like a victim of your own mind. So practicing endurance through that, being patient with it, and seeing that whether it is what you call a good meditation or a bad meditation, it's all good. If you're putting effort into your meditation, you're going to learn something from even the bad days and things not going in the way you want, and you're learning what factors are leading to this bad experience, what factors lead to the good experience, what's missing, what's lacking, what's there, what's present. And you learn in that way, and then you can, over time, you can recreate and bring up those factors that are important in your meditation and gradually abandon and avoid those things which are an obstacle to meditation. So one of the first things I learned was, if you want to have a good meditation and sit down peacefully, don't go and have an argument with somebody. Because if you had an argument with someone, you sit down and your mind, all it can do is think about what you've been arguing about. So that motivates you to not only put effort into your meditation, but also be careful what you say and how you say it to the people around you, because you see it affects your meditation. Or, like as a monk, we only eat one meal a day, and you very quickly learn if you eat too much, maybe because you're worried you're going to feel hungry later, well then you have to deal with a lot of sleepiness and sluggishness in your meditation because you've eaten too much. So you're learning cause and effect in your practice, what leads to what. So it's not just the meditation itself, it's also what goes before and after. These are important as well, to develop the reflective power of the mind, mindfulness, awareness, precepts, they support the practice as well. So there's many factors. But the simple answer is everything is uncertain, so you just have to accept that. Some days it's good, some days it's bad. That's all right.
Dear Ajahn, I seem to have a lot of negative karma coming up in my life at the moment. How should I cope with it?
Well, similar things that we've been talking about. One is having right view. We are all the products of our past karma, whether it's what we've said and done today or last year or 10 years ago. Our karma is constantly bringing results back to us, what we call vibhaka karma, the resultant karma, good and bad, depending on what kind of karma we've made. And we just have to accept that. That's reality. Is what we do, what we think, what we say, what we do comes back to us. And so in one sense you're learning to be very careful about the kind of karma you're making every day, because over time you might realize, this is going to affect me not just now but in the future. But you're also developing that patience and the acceptance, this is karma when things come up, and some are good, and that's nice, and we don't complain when the good karma gives its result. We enjoy it. But when the bad karma we've made gives its result, we complain. And we say, this shouldn't happen. Why me? I don't want this. But this is the practice of upekkha, or equanimity, is understanding that karma, we're all the owners of our karma, good and bad, and we have to accept that. So a very common question Buddhists have is, how can I get rid of all my bad karma? I'm just fed up with it all coming up, causing me trouble. Well, you can't change the past, can you? We can't do that. But you can change your karma here and now, today, by developing the skillful qualities of the path the best you can. Kindness, generosity, keep the precepts, practice mindfulness, reflect on the Dhamma. Train yourself in that so that even though sometimes bad karma is coming up, bad things happen to you, happen to the people you love, negative situations arise, and often out of our control, you've got the best qualities ready to meet those situations, and you fall back onto your practice of and cultivation of the path rather than giving into more unskillful states of mind. So when something goes wrong, you might get upset, worried, angry, and make the whole thing worse as an experience. The thing that's happened, you may have no control over. So you hear some bad news, or you fail your exam, something goes wrong, somebody crashes into your car out of the blue, whatever. Things happen. But how are you going to meet that? You have to come back to yourself. What's my state of mind now? Is it skillful or unskillful? What qualities do I need to develop now? So if somebody's very angry with you and it just seems like it's ruining your day, ruining your life, when the Buddha said, how do we meet anger? We meet anger with non-anger. The easiest thing when someone is angry with us and insults us and gives us trouble is to get angry with them and then have a fight, but actually makes worse, doesn't it? If you can establish patience, mindfulness, non-anger, so you're bringing up a sense of tolerance, even though they may be behaving badly, you're going to make that whole problem much easier on yourself, easier to get through, keep your mind in a more wholesome, skillful state. And it'll probably affect the other person as well in a good way over time. So it's that kind of approach. Things will happen and go wrong in our life that we don't want, but how are we addressing them and meeting them in the present moment? We have to try and keep our mind rooted in skillful qualities. Keep the precepts. That's another way of assessing your practice. If something bad happens, are you still keeping your precepts, or is it leading you to break your precepts? So, somewhat, usually it's people, isn't it? Not always, but usually it's people. They come and they cause you trouble. Are you going to say things or do things to harm them? Or if it's something more personal like illness, when illness comes up, does that just make you depressed or angry? You have to keep cultivating mindfulness, goodwill, patience with the situation. So if you see everything is like almost like a test of our practice and an opportunity to develop our practice in that situation. It doesn't have to be overwhelming when bad or negative things happen, but we do have to develop a skillful attitude and try and learn from them, get through them with skillful qualities in our mind, rather than just giving up. If we give up, then we can't do anything, and we become disappointed, depressed, fed up. We have to come out of that by developing the skillful qualities, which takes effort, patience, but in the long run it's the better way to go.
The last question this evening. Dear Lung Paul, Ajahn Chah mentioned that happiness and suffering are of the same value. Why is it much harder to see attachment to suffering as compared to attachment to happiness? Thank you.
Well, all attachments are rooted in ignorance and delusion, not seeing the truth. So all attachments are hard to see. Some people find it harder to see the attachment to suffering and pain and difficulty and how that's causing them trouble. Others find it hard to see the attachment to happiness. They are both equally problematic, but Luang Por Chah was speaking from a very high place of nibbana, somebody who's perfected this path. the mindfulness, the wisdom, the insight, the understanding of the conditioned nature of phenomena was well developed to the point where he's just seeing everything as just cause and effect. We say everything is Dhamma, just as phenomena. So in that sense, everything is equal value. A thought is just a thought. At first, we have to learn how to train our thoughts, so we give up the angry, greedy thoughts, deluded thoughts, and cultivate the non-angry, non-greedy, non-deluded thoughts. That's the normal way we practice and are taught. But as our level of mindfulness and understanding deepens, we're going beyond just even the conventional view of good and bad, good and evil, and we're saying, well, thought is just thought. It's just, we talk about the body and mind as 5 khandhas, and these khandhas are the basis for our attachment. So as long as we're lost and attaching to the physical form, feeling, memory, thought formation, sense consciousness, as long as we're still deluded by them, we take them as self, and then we suffer with them. So even pleasure is a cause of suffering because we don't want to lose it, or we're seeking after it. Pain we don't like, suffering we don't like, obviously, because in its nature it's difficult to bear with. But through the practice, we're developing the mind, sort of raising it up to see actually whatever aspect of the khandhas you look at, pleasant or unpleasant, happy or suffering, if it's grasped at, clung to with attachment, with ignorance, it's going to be suffering. So the noble ones are those who have seen that and they've raised their mind above it. And the arahants completely have separated their mind from the attachment to the khandhas. So the khandhas are still there, as long as the arahant's still alive. So someone like Luang Por Chah, especially his last 10 years of his life, he had tremendous pain and discomfort, but he never seemed to display any kind of suffering with that pain. He's still feeling it, but he's not suffering with it. I'm not sure what pleasure he had in the last 10 years of his life, other than his own states, inner states of samadhi. On the outside, very little pleasure, but he would have had the pleasant sukha vedana sometimes, and the piti and sukha, and the clarity of a peaceful mind inside. So that would have been his kind of refuge. But he still had to experience with his body a lot of pain. But there was always a sense that his mind is way above it. So it sees everything as equal value because it's all based on the attachment to the khandhas, pleasure, pain, happiness, suffering. As long as you're attached to the khandhas and haven't seen them as impermanent, not self, well, you're going to suffer. But if you have penetrated the Four Noble Truths and seen these khandhas as anicca, dukkha, anatta, well, the mind goes to a place where it's as if looking back at them and not suffering with them anymore. The khandhas are just the khandhas, but they're not my khandhas, my pleasure, my pain. The mind is as if separate. So then there's no suffering anymore. So that's why it becomes all of equal value. There's nothing great about pleasure that never lasts. It's only temporary. Pain doesn't last either. Pain arises, it passes away. Pleasure arises, it passes away. So the mind of one who's reached Nibbana sees things like that as all equal value. Whatever the world has to offer, painful or pleasant, happiness or suffering, ultimately it's all conditioned, it's not self, it's not to be clung to as self. So they see everything like that as of equal value. It's like the Buddha on the night of his enlightenment, he set up his seat, well actually in the morning when he was setting up his seat under the Bodhi tree to practice his final night before he's enlightened, he made this seat and a farmer gave him 8 bundles of grass. And he said these 8 bundles represent the 8 worldly winds which human beings are normally being blown about by. So that's gain and loss, praise and blame, status, loss of status, pleasure and pain. We're all stuck in this realm of seeking pleasure, running away from pain, reacting all the time with craving, with attachment. But the Buddha recognized that's the root cause of his suffering and problem as a human being. So he's building a seat, so he's going to sit on top of the 8 bundles of grass and bring his mind, lift it up beyond gain and loss, pleasure and pain, praise and blame, status, loss of status. The normal experience in the world, he's going to raise his mind beyond that to Nibbana, where there's no loss, no gain, no praise, no blame in the mind. Maybe on the outside these things are still taking place, but in the mind there's no attachment to them. So Luang Por Chah was speaking from a very high place, but it's necessary to hear that sometimes, just to remind us that's what we're aiming towards. Because pleasure and success and happiness is alluring, and we tend to go for that. I'll get my short-term pleasure, I'll take that now and give up the practice and just grab my pleasure while I can. Many people think like that. Most people don't like pain, so they try to get rid of it, run away from it, and often make it worse by attaching to it and making it bigger than it is. But as you practice mindfulness in the way Luang Por Chah taught, you establish mindfulness, keep your mind in the middle, the place that nobody sees or notices normally. It's placed in the middle where it's neither grasping at pleasure nor grasping at pain. It's aware, it's knowing, but not grasping. That's where real peace arises, where real wisdom arises. So that's what we're aiming for, to cultivate more of that, more mindfulness and the insight, seeing everything as not to be clung to, not to be grasped at. So maybe we'll end the question and answer session there for tonight, and wish you all well in your practice, and see you again next time.
Andamayang Dhamma Kataya Sadhu Karang Dadamase Sadhu Sadhu Sadhu